Okay, so comedy is something that we've been talking about kind of off and on amidst all of the darkness and drama,
Keep
that's
it
featured
light.
in drama that's featured uh, 2000 AD, right?
Mm.
But I wanna know what your, like, a comedy moment that sticks out to you.
I realize that this is punishment for 6 months of putting you on the spot at the beginning of every episode.
Sure is.
Um,
My,
I
how the turntables.
yeah, there's lots of I always tended to favor the dark comedy more than kind of
Sure.
out and out laughs. Um, and the one that me as soon as you asked me, the one that immediately sprang to mind was from Judge Dredd Mechanismo, the original story
Okay.
back in the early 2000s, where we've got robot judges and Dredd's really annoyed because everyone's like, "Yay, robot judges!" and they're doing really, really well. And then I think it's either at the I think it's the start of the second episode, perhaps, um, and like the control panel just with the controllers goes, "We got a malfunction on 9." And it's a big hulking mechanismo robot, and it's going up against a wall creep, and it's just repeatedly smashing this guy's head. And it's caught in a loop. It's caught in a loop. Shut it down! Shut it down! Just go up against wall creep. Just like, and I just there's something about that kind of obviously you don't see it necessarily doing that repeatedly, but I found that very funny. But there's lots of moments in Nemesis and Robo Hunter and all this that and the other. Yeah, that's I think someone being smashed face first into a wall is probably my favorite comedy moment. He said in a sentence that doesn't quite make him sound like a psychopath, but isn't far off. This is in orbit every Wednesday, athletes.
Get 2000 AD now. Get 2000.
Borak Thung athletes, this is in orbit every Wednesday. I am your host Molch-R, and this is your host Chloe, and we are back for another half an hour or so of chat about the galaxy's greatest comic, 2000 AD. It's nice to see that you are fully recovered now from nominally fully recovered from San Diego.
I was going to say, let's not push it. Let's not go that far. But yeah, for the most part, up, functioning. But I actually, now that I think about it, I should have been like, no, I'm still fucked, dude, because that would have given me a pass for so much. But instead, yeah, no, I'm fine. Everything's good.
Good, yeah. Yeah.
Mostly back to normal. But, but I want this week to be about a thing that we have brought up before,
Mhm.
but I'm gonna dial it in a little bit. Okay. You ready?
Okay.
Are you
Yeah.
ready?
Yeah.
So, one thing that we have talked about before on here is the fact that somehow, through means of the devil himself, surely, John Wagner is not a part of the Hall of Fame.
This
And
is the Eisner's kind of the Comic
well,
Con kind of
yeah,
Hall of Fame kind of thing.
sure, yes. And well, I mean, he's in all of our Hall of Fames, but as far as the Eisners go, coming off of San Diego, it still just sucks that every year, somehow, Wagner does not even have a nomination.
Mm.
I know personally for a fact that he has been nominated. Ooh, dish dish. But somehow he's not in there. And thankfully, we are getting, like, obviously people that are much deserving of it. Finally, this year, Eddie Campbell got in there. Yay.
Mm. Oh god,
Kyle
really?
Baker. Kyle Baker got in. Like,
Shame.
how these people have not been there is
Mm.
completely beyond me. But John Wagner remains not amongst that list. And S but as we can just sit and bitch about that forever, I wanna actually dial it in, and I wanna talk about why John Wagner is one of the most talented comedy writers.
Mm, mm.
John Wagner's comedy strips. The comedy.
I mean,
And it's not just because I
hmm.
kind of was leafing through the Bogie Man again the other day.
Well, I mean, let's set some parameters here because for me, comedy runs through John's work
Oh,
like
yeah.
lettuce through a stick of rock. Like it's always there, even in like even his most serious quote unquote stories. That I'm thinking Judge Dredd America, I'm thinking Button
Yeah.
Man, things like that. It's there's always leavening moments of comedy
Yes.
in them. Um, but I guess you want to focus more on the out and out comedy based on our conversation before we hit record.
I mean, we don't have to. I've already dialed it in a little bit, Mike. We don't have to. I'm just saying we're not talking about the hard-hitting moments. We're talking about
No.
the levity moments. So you can talk about whatever your little heart desires when you think of John Wagner's comedy.
Well, so right. I will start off by saying that, and I've written this multiple times that John's sense of humor is dark and mischievous.
He's
Um,
Scottish.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. But but remember that he's American Scottish.
Yes.
So there is for want of a better phrase, a bigness to it as well. So it's not just necessarily dour and dark that you might expect from uh,
No,
kind of
America
Scottish.
donated the chutzpah,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
bigness
So
of it.
so he does big and dumb as well as he does kind of nuanced and dark.
Yes.
Um, and this is somebody who has done everything from comedy musical numbers. Like if there's one product of the John Wagner Alan Grant writing partnership that you kind of immediately springs to mind, it's all the the comedy songs that spring out of nowhere. Um, he's done everything to that. He's done the Bowles Brothers. He's
Yay!
done. I was a teenage. You can see where this is going, can't you? Reference. I was a teenage tax consultant.
No, see,
Um,
nobody likes that strip. I love that strip. I love that. I went and sought out I have the progs, the individual progs, because I went and sought them out the last time I was in the UK, so now I get to boast to no one that gives a shit that I have every single strip of I Was a Teenage Tax Consultant.
Good God, good God. A woman possessed, Earthlets, a woman possessed. But, and then you get what is an extended joke slash metaphor of the Bogie Man,
Mhm.
which appeared in multiple places. Um, and all the way through this, there is this kind of almost silly mischievousness that manages to take even the most serious moments and turn them funny.
Yeah.
But then, as I say, then you get strips that are like the Bowles Brothers, which is just mad and silly
Yeah.
and over the top,
But see, even with the Balls Brothers, that's a scathing commentary on superheroes.
Mm,
Like,
mm.
it's so like, kind of following your point, all of John's comedy serves a purpose. I would say well, that feels like a broad statement, actually, but, like,
I
so
think he
so
probably
much
challenged that himself, to be honest with you.
so much of John's comedy, like, does serve a purpose, even if that purpose is also goofy.
Mm,
It's or, but it is the, kind of the jabby humor, even when it's not being like, when it's so unserious, it is kinda, like, pokey stabby at other things that
mm.
deserve to kind of be made fun of, I guess.
I think the big comparison, which I don't think enough people put these two people sort of not against each other, but alongside each other,
Mm.
is John Wagner and Alan Moore,
Yeah.
who have that brilliant skill of deconstruction, of picking things apart, showing why they work, showing how they work, showing how things get corrupted, etc., etc. But both have this strain of humor in their work,
Mhm.
and both, I think, either have it memory hold. Either people forget the comedy in Alan Moore's work, or they
Don't even get me
ignore the
started.
comedy in John Wagner's work.
Yeah. Well, I think that there is a weight put on, let's see, what I'm trying to organize my thoughts as I'm saying this out loud. So I think that because John is such a big part of what people think of when they think of Judge Dredd, and because people, like, especially people that haven't had the opportunity to read like more Judge Dredd than maybe the core bits and pieces that you would think of, that do tend to be um like massive and terrible and dramatic and problematic and like all of these things. I think that people automatically associate John with these big dramatic moments and don't necessarily remember that amidst all of that, there is that levity that arguably makes the drama even more horrific,
Yeah,
because it's kind of a rule of comedy that if there's something really dark, putting it against this lighthearted thing makes that darkness seem so much more dark.
yeah, yeah.
And, like, that's what he's good at, and that's what Alan Moore is good at too. I mean, everybody sits there and looks at things like Watchmen and V for Vendetta and things like that, but they don't see, like, the little tiny bits and pieces of humor that are sprinkled into it, but they also don't see Maxwell the Magic Cat, like, there's so like, uh this is the John Wagner episode, but now you've got me started, and it's so many people ignore that Alan Moore is so, so funny. He's
Mm,
an incredibly funny writer, and I think that John often, to the uninitiated perhaps, or the ignorant, just push the comedy bits off to the side
mm,
in favor of, like, this big dramatic badass stuff, and that's exhausting. That's
mm.
exhausting, because when you don't have any levity and it's nonstop tension, then the tension doesn't feel as tense, for my
They're also
money.
they're also both very good, 'cause I think they're coming from slightly different angles,
Yes.
in terms of their media consumption, but, um their attitudes as well, but they're also very good at pastiches and homages, and if you look at John's career, I mean, it's just filled with them. Like it's the thing he does. He picks up a genre, he picks up a cliche, and then he puts his own spin on it. So, um, I was a teenage tax consultant is simultaneously a musical and a love letter to kind of old 1950s B movies. The Bowles Brothers is superheroes, but it's also the comedy of the Marx Brothers and
Yeah.
slapstick and I see a lot of particularly when he was writing with Alan. I do see a lot of the Goons the
Yeah.
Goon Show, in what they do, far more than say Monty Python, which is the
Mhm.
other pole of 1960s 1970s British comedy, um, and as a result, I think it's too easy. It is too easy to dismiss John, particularly when he was working with Alan. I think that's probably one of the reasons why he found American comics not to his taste.
Yeah.
There was less opportunity to be silly about stuff because,
Oh, we don't
uh,
do
you know
that.
exactly, many superhero comics are just so po-faced, and when they do comedy, it needs to be silly or it needs to be adorable, and if you particularly because he was coming him and Alan well, Alan moved over to American comics, and John tried to join him in American comics around about the time that actually their writing partnership was coming to an end.
Mm.
Um, And so that probably didn't help. either.
Yeah.
They did Boba Fett together, and also they did Batman together briefly.
Mhm.
I just don't think that that suits John's not just talents, but also just what he likes to write. You
Yeah,
know?
it's, a lot of I feel like the American comics market, even now still to a certain extent, but especially back when that whole period was happening
Mm,
for John and Alan, it's so much of especially things like DC, um, are very are very self-serious.
mm.
And especially in the '90s, sweet Jesus, like, late '80s, early '90s, my god.
Coming
Ugh.
back to what we were talking, with the comparison the kind of parallel development of John and Alan Moore, the kind of grimdark 90s was this, them taking everything that Alan had done with Watchmen and taking completely the wrong lessons from the whole thing, from somebody who loved Silver Age comics,
Yeah,
who
and
loved the
it's
silliness and the comedy.
well, the it's a self-seriousness. It was a lot of stories that were just so far up their own butt
Mm,
that it didn't there was no room for comedy to breathe up there, and it is yeah, it's kind of a shame. I feel like John had the capacity to really make that work and make a dent in what the American market was like and American books were like at the time. It's
mm,
just that there was no breathing room amongst anything else because everything was so self-serious, like, you had to take things seriously, and I but the irony of that is so many of the, 2000 AD stories that John wrote, they're great pieces of science fiction.
mm,
They are great pieces of, like, horror and fantasy and, like, all of these genres that for the American market were very self-serious, but he created them and wrote them in a way that was, honoring the genre and still giving it that room to be funny.
mm,
Like,
mm.
so it wasn't not taking it seriously, but it also wasn't taking it seriously at all, which
And yeah, the irony is that, of course, Alan Grant went on to do Lobo
yeah.
with Keith Giffen and Simon Bisley,
I know,
which is just
God.
incredibly, like, it's probably, for my money, it's one of the most American comics ever made, because it is just so ridiculous and overblown and over the top,
Sorry, I caught my water ball and was like, just
for those who can't see, Chloe on her water bottle has a sticker that says "Leave Alan Moore alone" in big green letters, which
yeah,
we shall leave without comment. Um, but
it's the wrong place to have this water
yeah,
bottle right
but
now.
but but with John, Alan was able to go on to do something as ridiculous and silly as Lobo, but I don't think that would have ever suited John, because he
Mm.
does still need to have the weight to things. So even when he's being silly, there needs to be the pathos that goes with it. It
Yes.
can't just be explosion. There needs to be this light and dark, and as a result, I just, it is an awful shame that he was never able to find a place. I think American comics is poorer for him not having had him in it. However, as I have very publicly said, if you don't have John Wagner, you don't have American comics in the shape that they are now.
Period.
Like,
Period.
no, yeah.
It's 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 all about the fact, and again, another reason why we are here to yell and scream and burn shit down about John not being in the Eisner Hall of Fame is that John really is an example of perfect balance
Mm,
in comics, to me at least, and I'm sure to you as well, Mike. Like, it's like you said, it's the the weight of it.
Yeah.
There is still weight to these stories. There's still a respect for the genre, and an enjoy like a personal enjoyment in the
Mm.
genre versus like the humor, and it's this perfectly weighed scale,
Mm.
and that you just don't get. And then, for a lot of writers' credit, I think that there are a lot of people who try to get to that point, but I think that few have perfected that balance in the way that John just kind of naturally had. It seemed like he didn't even try, you
Yeah.
know?
I mean, particularly with writers coming on to Dread over the years, many of them have tried to get that balance to speak with John's voice, and they can't
No.
because their balance is not his balance. So Garth Ennis has talked about this, where he says so much of what he was doing was just a pastiche of John.
Mhm.
He was just mimicking what he thought John's voice was, and it didn't work. And it's then you look at Al Ewing, you look at Simon Spurrier, you look at Rob Williams, Michael Carroll, and all of them are trying to find that place where their voice reflects John, not copies him, but just gives enough of a reflection that Dredd sounds right. But I do want to talk about the out and out comedy strips. So Robo Hunter,
Ah,
Ace Trucking, those kind of classics of early 2000 AD.
the
Because
proper classics.
who would have thought a comic strip about basically CB radio. But by the time, and also by the time it came out, CB radio was kind of starting to wane anyway.
Yeah.
Um, and because as I've mentioned many times before, I read all of this in the Best of 2000 AD monthly in the late 80s. I hadn't got a clue what CB radio was. I was just I was this sheltered little middle class boy who just had his comics and his Lego, um, and I thought trucks just drove themselves. But it, when um, when they did best of two, like they included the guide to all the lingo
Yeah.
for and this alien lingo, and he did that wonderful connection of the the patois that comes with a subculture, and John and also Alan just kind of turning it on its head and say, "Oh, these are alien space truckers," and you've got Massimo Ballardinelli, just the goddamn genius, just making these incredible. I just remember the ships, the shape of them, and they looked like as a kid you imagine spaceships should look when they're
Yes.
like the it's the Millennium Falcon principle. It's a heap of junk because it's intended to just push stuff around. Like it's a forklift truck with a hyperdrive. And there's so much going, and then you get Robo Hunter, which
Which is redneck nonsense.
oh yeah, but
It
and kind of crowbarred into kind of Dread World kind of stuff that it doesn't work, and you just kind of ignore that stuff. But that first story, Verdus,
Mhm.
where you've got John and Alan at their absolute, like, all guns blazing,
Yep.
and you've got Ian Gibson, for my money, at the height of his powers, and that's mind blowing stuff when you're a kid.
Yeah.
A world of robots, and this. I'd never seen a Sam Spade movie. I'd never, I didn't see Casablanca until I was in my 30s. And I know that's not a Sam Spade, but I didn't see any Humphrey Bogart until I was in my 30s. But I just instinctively understood that this character was a noirish pastiche kind of thing.
Yeah,
And he's
well, it's
running
a
around with a baby who smokes cigars 10 years before Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Um, he's got a talking, like, vape um, cigar thing, and a really, like, an idiot machine, a hoagie who runs around after him and causes chaos. And it's
it's
just
it's
it's a
all
delight.
timeless.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all completely timeless, and it is redneck nonsense. It is, which is how I totally sell Robo Hunter to people. It's like, "Do you like
But
redneck
right,
nonsense? Do you like
break that
sci-fi?"
down. Explain to our listeners what you mean by that.
Oh god, I don't actually know how to properly put into, like, eloquent words what I
All
mean
right.
by that. I'm going solely on what my brain comes up with immediately in charm in order to make that analogy work. Um, it's that all of the stories are extremely ramshackle. They're
Mm,
ramshackle, but much like other much like other redneck machinations, like, it's ramshackle, but it works.
okay.
Don't fix it if it ain't broke, sorta thing, and, like and so much of Robo Hunter is, like, situational comedy
Mm,
and, like, one-off tiny little throwaway jokes, and that and like you said, kind of this timelessness of of the pastiche.
mm.
Like, just making fun of and even predicting, I would say, like, stuff that would happen in the future. That's also something that I totally credit to Wagner is I do genuinely properly believe tell everyone John Wagner is a time traveler. Because so much of the stuff is both relevant to, like, all of these pop culture references from the past,
Mm.
but also you get things the you referenced the talking cigar and all of that stuff, and vapes, man. Like, we're
Yeah.
like, he's somehow working in the past, future, and present in Robo Hunter all at once in a way that's, like, does feel very quintessentially sci-fi, but also feels, reading it way later, like, how'd you come up with that?
Mm.
You know what I mean? I'm rambling at this point,
Well, no,
but
but it's also it's a vision of the future that's grounded in the present, and that makes it feel lived in and logical in a
it's
way
also
that an
grounded in
awful
the past.
yeah, in a way that a lot of futurism, particularly now, as futurism has got more and more dull, um, as the human imagination is contracted, uh, you have all these elements, and there's always this knowing wink with a little smile. And as someone who's been remarkably fortunate to spend quite a bit of time with John, um, often over a pint,
Aw,
uh, everything is delivered with this little knowing wink and a little smirk. Like
yeah,
he'll not thank me for this, but I always think of like he's still a schoolboy. He's still
aw,
that just kind of yeah. It's funny, isn't it? And I do recommend people check out John's website where he's
yeah,
basically writing his own well, life in comics is what he calls it, and he's up to the time. This was still pre 2000 AD, so he's up to his time on Valiant when he was basically handed this corpse of a comic and told to revive it, and it didn't work, but it laid the ground. He learned a lot from it, laid the groundwork for working on 2000 AD and Judge Dredd. Um, but again, so much of that has this particular voice to it where there's just humor running all the way through it,
mhm.
and I think it's it's such a shame that well, it is a shame, but at the same time, I'm glad we've got to keep him, that we've
Yes.
been able to keep him for so long. Um, but it is a shame that he's not more widely appreciated, not just in terms of his influence on the industry, which runs far, far deeper than I think an awful lot of people are willing to accept. Because no John Wagner, you could
Oh god,
argue that
know a lot
2000
of
AD probably
things.
wouldn't have survived, particularly not without Dredd and all the other
Oh, yeah.
characters. characters that John and Alan came up with.
We're here to
Um,
put that respect on his name today. Like
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, but the influence that then had on everyone in the British invasion, who
yeah.
changed, the mainstream of comics, and continue to do so until today. Um, but there's still this back catalogue of joyous silliness, and not just from when it was meant to be a children's comic.
Mhm.
It continues to this day. So we have a lot less John now than we used to,
Yeah.
but there's still comedy in there. There's still that little bit of silliness. There's still that desire to wrong foot and to lampoon more than anything.
Well, and something that we've also talked about before, I think even really in relation to John Wagner, like
Mm,
even if we're not getting as much John directly as there used to be, the beauty of things like comics and art in general is
mm,
that you get all of these people that go on to create the new generation of the thing that you love. And all
mm,
of these people are so heavily influenced by John that in your own way, you do get a little tiny piece of him with all of these stories because it's
mm,
just the influence is undeniable. So, aw, that's so nice. I
mm.
will say I will say this thing, kind of since brought up Bogie Man
Yeah.
back in the beginning. One thing I love about John is that, like, in particular reference to his comedy, and this is the Scottish part of the Scottish American thing, he is like a total he's goofy and sentimental. He's
Yeah.
like that's the Scottish part coming out, like, sentimental, but make it incredibly, incredibly goofy. Like,
Mm.
I thought about the, what is it? I wrote down the hospital workers getting really, like, sentimental over terrible songs. There's one called "Chirpy, Chirpy, Cheep, Cheep," and, like, it's it's the best thing, and it's like, "Oh, of course you grew up in Greenock, like, you're"
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I love that, and then there
Mm.
I almost wonder if some of that doesn't play to American audiences as much unless you have kind of a relatively strong knowledge base in why that's funny, and honestly, like, British culture,
Yeah,
you know?
him and Alan, did the contrast really well.
Mhm,
So, as you say, something very, very silly in the middle of pathos, and I think an awful lot of mainstream audiences need things to be one thing rather than like, a multiplicity of them.
2
Um,
things too much.
yeah, too much,
Mm-mm.
way too much. But I'm gonna get really literary, with somebody like uh, Robert Burns.
Mhm.
No, not Robert Burns. William Blake. There we go.
Mhm.
A different. But no, Robert Burns as well, because there is this strain in Scottish poetry of sentimentality, which kind of got quite sickly in the 19th century when there were plenty of people who would lampoon that.
Mhm.
Um, but with Robbie Burns, there is this. There's comedy in there. There's silliness. There's contrasts. There's an incredible sense of um, personality in his
Yes.
writing. And the reason I also mentioned William Blake is of course, and it's just an internet meme where it goes, and he wasn't Scottish. I'm not making the mistake that Blake was Scottish, but there's that internet meme where you can talk about William Blake as this incredible apocalyptic poet, very serious, inspired lots of things, but also he made a poem about how cute a tiger is.
Yeah. Tiger, tiger.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember. It says, "Tiger, tiger, you're so neat. You've got cute paws, which are your feet," or something like that. Like it sums up the whole. But but you need that. Something needs to be shot through, otherwise it becomes too much. And
Yeah.
particularly when you're dealing with such overwhelming pathos, which John does so well, you have to live in it. You have to have the light to the dark, because otherwise the dark is just too much.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's the thing about people like to read, heavy stories with the possibility of there being a light at the end of the tunnel,
mm,
and sometimes that little bit of hope comes in just a throwaway joke. Even if there's no happy ending to said story, at least there is a moment for you to breathe, take it in, and be able to move forward with it. And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
more effective than just sitting there going, "Oh, everything's terrible and bad." Bleh."
I,
So,
just to kind of belabor that point, there's the whole thing about, sometimes there's light at the end of the tunnel, and sometimes it's an oncoming train.
yeah,
And that for me kind of sums up
that's
John's
a good one.
writing, is that could be the end of the tunnel, or it could be your doom. Either way, there's a light there.
Yeah,
Um,
either way, at least you have the light.
yeah, you can see what you're doing. But yeah, I mean, we could keep going for at least another couple of hours. But
Yeah.
if you have not checked out John Wagner's website, then please do so. His recollections of his career are absolutely fascinating, and I hope one
And
day that they will be collected into a book.
and
Um,
he is just as much of a, like, informative, charming, funny, sentimental person just talking to him and like, unpublished, like, website writing,
yeah,
than he is in his stories. So it's like it is something to check out. It's very
yeah,
good.
and
Ah,
it's so many memoirs and recollections stray into the Alan Partridge. Needless to
yeah.
say, I had the last laugh, and that's not something John ever will ever suffer from. Because he's far too much his own man. And one thing I absolutely would, I think the one of the greatest exemplars of his out and out comedy is something like Ace Trucking,
Yeah.
which you can get on the 2000 AD app.
Ooh.
But one thing I would absolutely 100% recommend is, and this is the last work of John and Alan's writing partnership together.
Mhm.
Um, and it's The Last American. And not
Yes.
only is it beautifully
Oh,
illustrated by Mick McMahon, it is the only piece of apocalyptic literature that doesn't soft soap you. It doesn't offer
no, not at
platitudes.
all.
There is no light at the end of the tunnel, and
Mm-mm.
yet it is it's funny, and it's got actual human hope. It explains
Mhm.
why the end of the world is not in of itself a terrible thing.
Yeah, what's there's a phrase that I'm looking for here. It's not cynical, but it's not hopeful either. It's kind of like it's this wonderfully I can't think of the word. It's like this wonderfully almost factual neutral look on the end of the
Yeah,
world.
it's not nihilistic, and this is the thing. So
Not
much
yeah,
apocalyptic.
anti-nihilism
Well,
almost.
yeah, because it basically goes, yeah. Well, the world has ended. What can you draw out of the fact that and no spoilers, that there is an individual there who is there to witness it, and he can
Mhm.
find no hope.
Yeah,
He finds only death, and yet, and
and
it's such a unique perspective, and it came right at the end of the Cold War, but I think speaks to this moment um, quite profoundly. But it's funny.
okay, we can't keep talking about The Last American because I want that to be a whole other episode because I have
Okay,
way too
all
much
right.
to say about that.
Right. Okay. Well, you know
Sorry.
what? What we should do, and I know we always get to the end of the episode and go, "Oh, we should do this, 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 and
I
this," and then
know.
people email, and thank you for emailing, and say, "Oh, absolutely, you should do this episode," and then we just forget
Yeah.
because there's too many we could do. But absolutely, we should do like a short series on the non, and I'm using like bunny ears here, non-2000 AD books by
Oh, that would be fun.
yeah, like kind of periphery. So before we start
Okay.
recording, you were talking about Deadline. So we should do an episode on Deadline. We should do an episode on Toxic. We should do an episode on The Last American. We
My
should.
heart. My
I
heart
know.
says
I know. That if you can hear hammering in the background, that's me making a rod for my own back.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
and that's me just fluttering around like a little excitable seahorse. Just, oh boy.
Right. Well, we're out of time for this week. I hope you've enjoyed this. I you know what? Go onto the 2000 AD app. Read Robo Hunter. Read Ace Trucking Company. Read The Last American. Find the. I was a teenage tax consultant. Find the Bowles brothers. We did a collection of the Bowles brothers, didn't we?
Did you?
I could have. We did one with the magazine. I'm going to go and find that so that people can. Judge Dredd magazine number 302.
Okay.
So we used to do like a bagged floppy comic
Yeah,
with
yeah.
with
I'm writing that down. I want that.
yeah 302. So yeah, if you go into the app and find Judge Dredd magazine 302, you can read the Bowles brothers, which is as funny an actually funny deconstruction of superheroes that you're likely to find.
Their names are Rocky and Eggy Balls. God
And
bless.
on that note, wonderful. Let us know in the comments, Earthlets, not just your favorite John Wagner funny moment, but your favorite funny moment in 2000 AD. And we pinky promise that we will come back to this and talk more on the comedy in 2000 AD. Download the 2000 AD app. Tons of good stuff on there. We've just updated, so there's some handy like reading categories on the carousel at the top. So you can pick up stuff about superheroes, the Dark Judges, Rogue Trooper, Rise and Fall of the Trigan Empire, which is a classic old sci-fi series.
That's a fun one.
Lawless, which we've talked about on the podcast before. And if you've got kids, there's loads of graphic novels available for kids on the 2000 AD web shop. And whatever you purchase, if you log into the 2000 AD web shop with the same details, the subscriptions will match. Well, the accounts will match up, and you can download whatever you've bought as PDFs or CBZ files and keep them forever.
Zed.
So we'll be back in 7 day time, Earthlets, for more from the Galaxy's Greatest Podcast. In the meantime, I've been Molch-R. This has been KLO-E. And until next week, Splundig Verthrig.
See you next week, Earth digging buddies.
Get 2000 AD now. Get.
Well, thanks for joining us on In Orbit every Wednesday, Earthlets. Make sure you like and subscribe and go along to 2000 AD, where you'll be able to subscribe to 2000 AD and the Judge Dredd magazine. Sign up to our newsletter and you'll get hundreds of pages of free comics to download. And download the app for your Apple and Android devices. Now, don't forget, Earthlets, this is the 2000 AD universe. We just live in it.